Kaylee, you starting or am I?
I will start. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Legislative Town Hall. My name is Kaylee Cox, and I'm the Region Coordinator for FES in the ACEC of Florida. I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we begin. Everyone is muted and in listen-only mode now. If you would like to ask a question to Representative Fischer, please type it in the question box. If we have time at the end, we will answer the remaining questions. And with that, I'm going to turn over the rest of our program to our moderator and Region 2 Director, Pete Sheridan.
Thank you, Kaylee. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being part of our first ACEC of Florida Town Hall meeting for Region 2. For those of you who may not know me, I am Pete Sheridan, your Region 2 Director for ACEC of Florida. Your Region 2 Task Force is working diligently to work on many different programs. It consists of William Wilson, Nina Sickler, Andy Cummings, J.W. Hunter, and myself. We're working to bring you informative and relative events that are important to the business of engineering, and we are very excited with today's virtual meeting. Today we have a very special guest for our town hall meeting. Mr. Jason Fischer is a member of the Florida House of Representatives representing the 16th District, which includes Southern Duval County. Representative Fischer is a Jacksonville, Florida native who attended the University of North Florida, receiving a degree in electrical engineering. Yay, engineers. In addition to serving in the Florida House, Representative Fischer previously worked for Florida Power and Light and spent 5 years as a civilian engineer for the United States Navy at the Naval Facilities Engineering Command. Representative Fischer is currently employed by HNTB, an infrastructure solution firm. And as a state legislator, Representative Fischer focused much of his time on issues pertaining to education, infrastructure, and technology. In his spare time, he is a family man, married to his wife, Melinda, and father to their 3 children, Jason Jr., Luke, and George. Representative Fischer, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today and to talk about the upcoming legislative session. Thank you very much.
Pete, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And, as a fellow engineer, I'm looking forward to the questions, and I'm excited about the things to come.
Thank you. I want to give you the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about the legislature before we got into the questions, if you wanted, kind of covering some of those things that are near and dear to your heart and what you see.
Yeah. Just briefly, because I know sometimes folks will confuse us with Congress. We in the legislature don't meet year round. We have 60-day sessions and we have committee weeks that happen beforehand. But we do spend a large part of the year still doing a part of our job. This last couple of months has been primarily focused on helping people get unemployment benefits and all the different constituents with that. So that's actually become the biggest part of the job here recently. But typically in the off season, we meet with a lot of constituents, try to figure out things that are impacting their lives, and start working on legislation for the next session. Because of the COVID shutdowns and, as I mentioned, the unemployment benefits, that's caused a little bit of trouble there. It's given some good ideas for things to work on for next session, though, as well. There is election right in front of us, and so that's taking kind of very immediate importance. So a lot of us are heavily focused on that because of term limits. So unlike Congress, again, I mentioned Congress meets year round. We don't, unlike Congress, we can't just continue to serve. We have term limits, and so every 2 years we get a new Speaker of the House and a new Senate President, and that gives us the opportunity to move things quicker sometimes, because people who've been blocking legislation sometimes for different reasons, and we can talk about that actually on some of the bills we may talk about later on. It's good for the process. It helps things to kind of move through better and makes us all more solutions focused. And so there's a potential for a special session right after the election, but our normal session wouldn't be until March of 2021. So hopefully that lays kind of a good groundwork of who we are, what we do, and just a little bit of preview of what's ahead.
I appreciate that. I guess moving into some of the questions that we had, with the impacts, as you were relating to with the effects of COVID-19, what do you see the challenges will be for the state budget this year?
It all depends on what the recovery looks like. And so, just a minute ago, I mentioned that we have elections in November. That has a big part in what things look like. There are different economic theories one could take us on a recovery that's really quickly. The other one could dramatically slow it down. One could put us into more of shutdown on society, which will prevent certain parts of the economy and things to open back up. That causes significant economic impacts on our state budget. And while we've budgeted well, I think the budget that we passed this year and was signed into law by the governor, I think we have enough budget reserves, and the state's looking at doing enough cost reduction measures that will be fine. We may not need a special session on the budget for that. But the budget going into the next year, if we don't see great economic growth in the next couple of months, it's going to be really painful, and it's going to be really painful for a lot of us. And the pain will be shared amongst different industries, but as an advocate as somebody that's in our industry and an advocate for our industry, I'm really worried because we've got a big target. We got a big number in the budget, and so. We've got to do everything we can to make sure that the economy does well, but so that way we're less of a target. But we've got to do things to make sure that if things are reduced, that our losses are minimized. Because in my view, we are really a big driver of what happens in the state. I think without great roads and great bridges and an infrastructure that actually works well, the rest of it. The rest of the economy has a hard time flowing through. And so we're kind of the veins of everything else to move through. And if we don't have a good structure around it, it'll be hard to get things moving.
Agreed. So looking into that, we are hearing that FDOT is looking at ways to reduce the budget in preparation for this with the upcoming issues this year and next year. And you kind of alluded that the transportation fund may be a target on that. Do you really see a rate on it? Do you see the things, what things can we do as an industry to help you in protecting what we believe to be really an economic engine for the whole state by doing infrastructure?
Sure it is. Well, because of the pandemic, everybody's very hyper focused on healthcare, and there's a ton of inefficiencies in the system. And part of the problem is it's difficult now to point some of those things out because it's a very sensitive area. And so we'll probably have more investment in healthcare, and that will come at the expense of some of the other areas. Our fund is called a trust fund, but the reality is that even though it's been supposedly dedicated to go there, it's still very changeable in law. And so, my goal as a fellow engineer is to make sure that it was like $100 million that was cut the last time we had a huge economic recession, 2008, 2007 time period. I hope and I pray that we don't get close to that number. I hope that that's not the case. But what I would tell you is that all options are on the table except for raising taxes. There is no way that the legislature will raise taxes. It's just not going to happen. So that's not one of the solutions that's being considered. But where the different monies go, whether it's education or transportation. I mean, I think there's maybe some flexibility with healthcare, but I really doubt it. I think it's such a sensitive area. I think we'll see more investment from there. So I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to realize that everybody's going to take some kind of a haircut. I think the exercise right now is like 10%. But I think, and I hope that it'll be much less than that. Some of that depends on what the economic recovery looks like. Some of that depends on how well we're able to make an argument for our industry. And so what I would suggest is to engage now. I'm here, I'm a state representative, I represent some of the folks that are here, but I have other colleagues, Cord Bird, Wyman Duggan, Chuck Brannon, Cindy Stevenson. I can give you guys a list of the rest of the folks. Just, I'm not sure exactly what the Region 2 is. I don't have the map handy, but I can get that for everybody. But it's not just contacting me because I live here, but I would say it's the other folks around the state as well, making sure that our, because I'm sure just like several of you guys, we have an office in Tampa and we have an office in Miami, and it's making sure that our guys in our office are sitting down talking to the legislators face to face Because it's not just the road builders, by the way. And you know, they try to throw us under the bus and vice versa. You know, there's an interesting conversation I've heard about, you know, what some strategies are there. But we need to make sure we stick strong with our allies, but we need to make sure that our allies don't throw us under the bus, the proverbial bus as well. And then talking about throwing under the bus, I think that we shouldn't throw other industries under the bus, but we should have alternatives of areas that, you know, if money need to be moved around, we need to have some solutions ready to go when it comes time to make those decisions about what monies will be moved where. Say, well, let's not do it to this program, let's do it to this program. It's having that ability to say more than just don't do it to me, it's let's do it this way instead. And so having that solution ready to rock and roll is an important part of the process. And you know, I'll be working with Alan Douglas on it a lot when we're in Tallahassee.
Awesome, awesome. We know that the governor has a bit of a passion for basically environmental and stormwater. How does that fit now in the Everglades restoration? How does that fit into this current year budget, given the challenges that we're looking at this year, next year?
Yeah, I don't think that'll be one of the areas that's changed too much. I think there'll be an effort to pull some money that's set aside for preservation and put it more into the infrastructure behind water and wastewater. So, you know, it's a constant battle that we have with some of the very extreme environmentalist groups. They want money to be set aside for just preservation and buying of land. And I think there'll be a continued battle against that. So I don't see a reduction so much in some of the environmental budgets. It's possible, but I doubt it. A lot of this comes down to what the economy looks like. I think one of the governor's biggest priorities publicly has been in the environment and making sure that we have clean water and clean water and clean air. And you know, there's a renewed effort to push for resiliency in our environments. And so I don't think that'll backtrack at all. And if it does, it'll be one of the least impacted areas.
That's good news for us engineers that are involved in that. So from your perspective, what do you see the biggest policy challenges this year that may affect the engineering profession? And I think we've talked about infrastructure, but
yeah,
big policy challenges this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a renewed effort to try to change CCNA. I mentioned earlier about builders. You know, there is a constant tension between us and them. So there is that. You know, I can pretty confidently say that that part of the conversation will come up again. You also have some engineers who are disgruntled in certain areas of the state who've convinced some of my colleagues that it needs to be completely dismantled. And you know, they have their own reasons. You know, I'll let you guys engage with them however you want to, but I think there'll be a renewed effort there to try to change it, to try to bring, if not get rid of it, to try to bring some major reforms. I'm not sure that'll be successful though. I think that we have the time and ability to engage and make sure that our voices are heard in that process, because there's a real safety component to it. I don't need to make the argument to you guys, but I do need you guys to go make the argument to some of my colleagues, because as things get tight, as the budget, whether you know there's a great economic recovery or not, but as people are looking as ways to try to cut costs, this will be one that I think will get a serious look if we're not diligent on trying to shape that on the front end. You know, as far as other things that would affect our profession, you know, I know in years past there's been an effort to deregulate certain other professions. I don't think that's going to be something that comes up for our area. I do think that there will be a push to lower the barrier of entry to jobs at the lower end of the economic ladder, but I don't see any efforts to try to you know, get rid of a professional engineering license or get rid, you know, just I don't think that will have any that'll have any major legs. You know, as far as other infrastructure policy, I think a lot of it will just be the budget, frankly. I mean, I really don't think people are going to be trying to make major changes to how FDOT's structured or how any of the other agencies are structured. I think it'll be primarily budget focused in this session.
As it relates to CCNA, you know that we're very active and involved, and we'll be here to help you. Just let us know if there's any particular legislator that we need to help educate. We'll be more than happy to provide that service there to make your job a little easier there for us. So,
I will not name names right now, but I will get you an informal list, Pete, and we can strategically work with some of the folks around the state to constantly contact them to make sure they're well educated before they get pressured. Because there's a few that, you know, in the last 2 years kind of tipped their hand a little bit, so they need a little bit of love.
We'll be sure to give them that love. Are there any other policy issues, you know, not necessarily engineering profession, that will cause challenges for this year's session? And obviously the COVID and the impacts, and you alluded to you know, the health industry, but anything else that you see on the horizon that maybe we should be aware of just in general as you know, business owners and everything?
Yeah, so usually the state of Florida is very well in control of its own destiny because of the pandemic, because of the response to the coronavirus. It's caused some major challenges. And so I mentioned earlier about the budget quite a bit. There was talk of the federal government stepping in and backfilling some areas of some states, particularly ones that have been really well managed. So we, as the state of Florida, don't have a huge pension liability like some other states, and we've managed our money really well. Some of that has to do with who's president and who's not president. Some of that has to do with what the next Congress looks like. And so, you know, as we go forward, yes, we need an economic recovery here to help us, but we also will need some help from the federal government, because some of the things that have cost some of our businesses their inability to operate, some of that is federally driven. It's not all state driven. And so, you know, we're going to try to do what we can to help get Florida-based companies going, but some of that we're going to need a partnership from the federal government. And frankly, I don't care, you know, who's in which. I do care who's in which office, but as far as helping our state, you know, as your state representative, I'm going to work with whomever I can to get it going. My office here, where I'm telecasting from, I'm sorry it's so dark. We actually share an office with Congressman Al Lawson, who's on the other side of the aisle from me. He's a Democrat. Some of you may have worked with him back when he was in the state Senate here in Florida. But you know, he and I have a great partnership. And I will just tell you, and having talked to him, he and I were both shocked that over the summer that they had no infrastructure package. I mean, you know, we really thought, as I think a lot of you did, that it's bipartisan. Everybody should want to do the right thing. This is an area where, you know, people are less likely to get COVID because they're not going to be exposed. They're mostly outdoors and stuff like that. And it's just been this economic engine, and they couldn't get it done. They couldn't get it done. And you know, it's disheartening to him. It was disheartening to me. I'm sure a lot of you are upset as well. My sincere hope is that after we get past November, that the politics will start to come together where people will want to work with each other. Tallahassee, fortunately, is not a lot like DC. We're able to get things done, but how we handle what we do in session upcoming will have a large part to do with how the election goes and the willingness of Congress to work together. We are not going to raise taxes here at the state level, and so that could mean pretty dramatic cuts to certain budgets and reallocations of dollars. And so I know you said, you know, what are, you know, I wish I could give you a couple specific policy things that are going to come up, but it'll all be related around coronavirus response. Previous year, so I've been in the House for 4 years. There's been a reduction in incentives for companies to expand in Florida and to move to Florida. You know, I'm not sure that that's going to pick back up because there won't be the money there. I think if the feds are able to get their act together and help out help out some of the states, if not all of the states, then that tool may not be in the toolbox for another year or two. But I think it's an important way to stimulate growth. And you know, I think I've said all I can say on that one. I think a lot of it just depends on what happens after the election and whether people are going to act like grown-ups in Congress and work with each other.
Let's hope. Let's hope. So, do you have any other legislative priorities? I know you've been a real champion of autonomous vehicles and that whole technology. Is there anything on the horizon that, I know it's a challenging year, but from a policy standpoint that you may be wanting to lead the charge on even further?
Yeah, so the big one I'm going to try to work on is the security behind identity management. And so it's not the sexiest topic out there, but with a lot of identity theft, and as everybody moves digital, because of the response to the coronavirus, there's a lot more of these kind of communications, and you know, the security behind a lot of those things, and how do you verify a person is who they say they are. Well, the state of Florida is going through a modernization process of how we handle our information and how we handle your information and everything like that. And so trying to get the security protocols in place so that we can really have a truly digital platform. And so that's going to be something that I'm going to be working on quite a bit. One of my colleagues just went inside the DeSantis administration. One of my colleagues, Jamie Grant, he happens to work in the tech industry, and he's a lawyer, so not an engineer, but he and I speak a lot of the same lingo. And he's now the new Chief Information Officer for the state of Florida. And so the two of us are going to be working hand in glove with Senator Brandis on trying to get the legislation right so that he can do everything he needs to do to make sure that across the platforms in Florida, there's seamless transition. It's not very seamless right now, but that it's secure. And mainly it's working on the security protocols. And so that's one of the big things that I'm going to tackle this year. Just again, identity theft is huge. There's a lot of access points to the state databases that we need to close some of those loopholes. And so that's going to be a big one. Another one I'm going to work on is some drone legislation. I think it's important to protect people's civil liberties, but we need to find a way to use drone technology to go into places where humans can't go and gather information. Last year, I passed a bill that allowed our forest firefighters and our wildlife management organizations, environmental groups, state environmental groups, to look for invasive species and combat wildfires. And it's just the way Florida's drone bills have to be specified. Every little change requires its own separate bill, and so I'm going to be looking to try to do some more drone legislation in the coming session.
Sounds interesting. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
We did have one question. Do you see any changes to the schedule and the funding regarding MCORs? I mean, obviously, you know, that was a pretty aggressive schedule, an important corridor for sure. But do you see any changes in that given our current climate at the legislature?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that the process could slow down. You know, the very far extreme environmentalist groups are trying to do everything they can to prevent anything from moving forward. They'd like all of them to just completely shut down, right? And they fought it from the beginning, and they're just going to try to fight it the whole way through. And so I think I don't think that they'll be stopped, but I think there'll be some debate over it, and I do think that it could slow down in process. I hope not. I'm going to push for a continued, you know, march forward, because it's truly transformative for the state. And so, you know, I'm going to do everything I can to push for it. And without us pushing hard on it, you know, other forces are going to be pushing in the other direction. Like I said, the governor, you know, has a very strong environmental agenda, and so luckily he doesn't listen to the ones that are the farthest out on it. And I know that he sees the need for the infrastructure. We're in tough budget times, so what does that mean? Hopefully it doesn't mean it slows down, but it could.
Kelly, are there any questions coming through? I haven't seen any come across, so I'm just,
No questions at this time.
okay, all right. Representative Fischer, that's kind of the end of our canned questions. I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to take an opportunity to say to your engineering brethren out here that are all behind you and supportive of all your efforts. I know I can't thank you enough for your service to our state legislature and being there for us to help defend these things and giving us a heads up on stuff. Is there any other points that you wanted to bring out at this point in time?
Sure. Well, thanks, Pete. What I would say is, and I try to make this pitch to everybody I can that's close to our profession or in our profession, and it's my observation from being in the legislature. Most of my colleagues are lawyers, and there's a few doctors, a few CPAs, very few engineers. I think me, Jackie Toledo, and Bruce Anton, but Bruce is leaving, and the more of us that have a seat at the table, the more we can win. And that's what I see what happens with other professions, is the more folks that they have in the chamber, the more advocates they have for the things that are important to not just their individual business, but their industry as a whole. I mean, we truly are a citizen legislature, and my colleagues look to me as an expert in the area. Now, there's political considerations, right? They don't always defer to me or Jackie, but what I say weighs on them pretty heavily. And so we have term limits. I am not going to be here forever. Jackie's going to term out the same time I am. Lake Ray is one of my predecessors. He was an engineer, we as an industry, I hope I can convince some of you to start grooming some of your folks in your firms to look at running for office and potentially serving, a lot of times people start at the city level or county level, but that actually takes a lot of time away. I do spend a lot of time away from my job doing this, but I think the city hall piece, could be more disruptive in some ways. And so I would love to work with any of you, or if any of you are interested, to try to help groom some of your employees to look at government service in some form or capacity, because there's not a direct pipeline of us that are going for the legislature at this point, but there is a direct pipeline of lawyers. I mean, it is inherent to their business. If they can control the laws, they can control their rates, essentially. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If they can game the system, and they do it in mostly very honest ways, but the legislature needs some diversity of professions, and so that would be the one big thing I would try to leave you with is, you may not be able to do it. You may feel like you got so much else going on, but there's got to be other folks within the organizations who may be interested in doing something, and you don't have to be super political to be effective. If you noticed, I think I've said Republican or Democrat maybe once this whole time, when I talked about Lawson and whatnot, but you can do things in a very nonpartisan way and still be completely effective. So even if you're somebody who doesn't feel like you're very partisan or follow politics, you don't have to do that to be effective over here. You have to understand, what's happening on the ground, but you don't have to be somebody who's just, super partisan to get it. In fact, that's the kind of person we don't want, right? I think the last thing we want is more of the folks like DC, and we want more folks like those of us that are on this call who are just like, what are the facts? What does the data say? How do we build a solution, and let's move forward with it? But we've got to get more of us in the game. So when conversations about CCNA come up, it's not just Pete saying it, and Pete's a great spokesman. It's not just Alan Douglas saying it, and Alan is a great spokesman, or John Johnson, but it's somebody that's inside the tent. It's somebody who's within the House, within the Senate. It's kind of one of those folks that's already in the trusted circle. So I'll kind of leave it off on that, but it's truly an honor to represent us over in Tallahassee. I don't forget about it. I always think about you guys, and I wish that our world was I wish that world over there was a lot more like our world. But I need more of you to come with me over there, so that way we keep it more sane. We keep it from being like DC.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I mean, I think there's a lot of hesitation on our part of how do we work and be able to do that. You know, there's, as you know, engineers are very committed individuals that want to turn around and make a huge difference out there, and they give their all like they do in their job. So it's a balance, and I think you know, I appreciate what you're saying, because you as a family man with 3 young children and doing this as well as you know, having to work, you can show that it can be done, and we can actually as engineers make it work and survive and be able to get back. There may be, you know, I'll see if I can't round some people up. Maybe we can have them talk to you a little more on that if they're interested. So if you'd be so willing, sir. So
I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it. Love to help people grow in their, you know, in their careers if they're looking to do things in the political arena, and I'm glad to give advice. You know, glad to help out. My wife's an engineer. You know, you mentioned, you know, you mentioned her a couple times. She's electrical engineer like I am. She has her PE. She works here locally, and you know, it takes a spouse who's willing to have some skin in the game, and they're willing to sacrifice as well. I make a little less money than I would otherwise, you know, honestly, but I feel like it's worth it. You know, it creates opportunities for a lot of other people, and I hope that I can convince some of you to, if you don't do it, to convince some of your employees to do it, or colleagues.
great. Representative Fischer, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know you are, you know, you've got some other appointments coming up. We really value the time that you're able to spend with us, and look forward as you get into this session. If there's anything else we can do, obviously we have John Johnson and Alan over there, but you got a whole bunch of friends over here that we're willing to come over and help you on those important items. So thank you again for your continued service, and thank you for spending the time with us today. Greatly appreciate it.
You got it, Pete. I really appreciate you and Nina and Andy and William and everybody who's on the call. I mean, thanks for dialing in, and thanks for listening. Pete, you've got my contact information. Please feel free to email that out to everybody so they've got my email and personal cell phone number. I'm very reachable. Would love to help you or your neighbors or whatever. I'm always here for you.
Thank you, and good luck this year in the session. We'll be right there whenever you need us. So
thanks.
Have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for being here today.
Take care, guys.
Thank you so much.